Egypt, 163rd out of 108 countries. The tip scales symbolize Egypt's draconian laws that impose long prison sentences for anyone who dares to criticize or protest against the government. Egypt is one of the world's biggest jailers of journalists. Some spend years in detention without being charged or tried. Others have been sentenced to long jail terms or even given life imprisonment in the inquisitive mass trials. Many of the media is now controlled directly or indirectly by the state, and intelligence services or companies close to the government. More than 500 websites are blocked, and more people are getting arrested because of their social network posts. In 2013, the news portal Madame had reported on corruption and security issues in a manner that is often critical of the government, and it is the last professional news website that reports independently and is one of the most important sources of quality journalism in Egypt. Since May of 2017, the website has been blocked by the country. Egypt is one of the most dangerous places on earth for journalists, and the editors of Madame risk a lot to publish independent journalism. Even taking credit for their work can be dangerous, as they often leave their authors' identities open. Read some of Madame articles at the bottom of the scales. Quite the metaphor for the lack of justice. From Torah, Harry Potter in an Egyptian Prison, by Abdurrahman Al-Gandhi, for Madame Massoud. I struggle back to the prison wing, my arms protesting under the weight of the visit bags I'm carrying, one in each hand. I can feel the sweat streaming from underneath my hair, which has been left to grow for months, and now the longest it's ever been. Inside me is a glowing particle of joy. My sister has brought me a present, having found a website that sells Harry Potter merchandise for obsessive fans. She turned up today's visit with a long rectangular package, the kind you might find at an Ollivanders. Inside it, she produced a magic wand with round knots along its length, the Elder Wand. I grinned, thinking about how we played with it in the visiting room, and I explained the story to my mum. I approached the guard who sits at the entrance of the wing, ready for the second visit day search and a pat-down. I place the bags in front of him, and he checks their contents one by one: food, clothes, sweets, soap. When he gets to the rectangular box, he peers at it, then opens it. He takes out the wand, turns it over several times in bemusement, then looks up to me. "What's this?" "What's this?" he asks. I hesitate awkwardly, then venture. "Ever heard of Harry Potter?" He stares at me as if I'm speaking Chinese, then turns his attention back to the wand and starts to bend it in half. I decide to tell him the truth before he breaks it. It's a magic wand. He raises his gaze at me slowly, looks me straight in the eye, and returns his gaze with total seriousness. "God protects us, whateverness." He scoffs, slapping his hands together, shaking his head, having tossed the wand and its bulk back into the bag and waved me through. As I pass, he's muttering to himself about the sights he sees in the prison these days. I act innocent. He doesn't know that the wand he was just in his hand was just a few seconds ago was created by Death himself. Later, after everyone else is asleep, I sit cross-legged in the far corner of the cell. It is 1 in the morning, and the cell is cramped but intimate. It's slightly damp thanks to the bathroom next door, and only a dim bulb lights the nighttime darkness. We call it the kitchen, because it's festooned with Tupperware containing vegetables, onion, garlic, spices, and all manner of other bits and pieces for cooking. I take a sip of coffee from my paper cup and then pick up the wand and contemplate it. I could do a bit of magic to relieve this stifling loneliness, to lift for a few moments the cloak of alienation I've worn so long and hard has become tattered. I raised the wand and pointed a tomato. Wingardio Leviosa. Moving my wrist in accordance to the instructions I stored in memory, a swish and a flick. After a few failed attempts, I abandoned the tornado and aim at my coffee in hope of warming it up. Incendio! Nothing. And then I realized that the spell had succeeded. I had set the paper cup on fire rather than warming the coffee up. Thank the Lord for my limited magical talents. The 5 years since I read the series has obviously affected my memory. I take pleasure in thinking about the similarities between me and Harry. Before my 19th birthday, I lay among the bodies in the cell and traced out the words "Happy Birthday" on the floor, just like Harry did on the stone floor of the shack where the door suddenly burst open and he learned he was a wizard. In my case, the door slammed open to reveal a gang of intelligence officers yelling, kicking, and punching as they dragged us out for a shakedown. I think, too, how many people love Harry and would consider him a hero, while others hate him and plot his destruction. All because of a scar he didn't ask for and loathes with all his heart, never wanting to be anything other than a normal human being. This prison will scar me, too. I can already see the signs of being shown immense love from some and bitter hatred from others because of it. I no more asked for it than Harry did a scar. I see a faint movement in an open tub of dates before me. I squint at the dim light. A worm. A tiny worm wiggling comically, half a date. I grab an empty jar from beside me, drop the date into it, and close the lid. I watch the worm shuffle out of the date and extend itself along the bottom of the jar. It surprises me by embarking on rapid laps of the jar on its tiny legs. Round and round it goes. Not stopping once, it reminds me of the thoughts going round and round in my head. I point at the one Engorgio, the growth charm. It ignores me and continues its energetic circuits of the jar. I feel a strange camaraderie watching the worm in the dark like this. Darkness is meant to be frightening. But these days I rarely feel at ease except when I'm in the dark. I remember Dumbledore's words. It is the unknown we fear when we look upon death and darkness, nothing more. Perhaps that is why I fear the future. I decide to name the worm Hedwig, after Harry's owl. I give up trying to enlarge it with the wand. It doesn't look like there's any room for magic in this wretched place. I sing to Hedwig instead, watching the scene from above as I see a young man with wild hair sitting cross-legged on a wet floor, in darkness save for the dim glow of a light somewhere. He clutches a magic wand as it's his only hope. He sings while next to him, on the floor, a worm shuffles in endless circles, searching for meaning inside her jar, just as he too searches for meaning. Another saying of Dumbledore comes to mind. Happiness can be found, even in the darkest of times, if only remembers to turn on the light. And I remember Hedwig with a smile. Lumios, I whisper. Harry Potter, courtesy L.A. Editor's note. 22-year-old student Alboame Algendi was arrested from a car in Ramsey Square, Cairo, with his father in October of 2013, a few months after the ouster of former President Mohamed Morsi. They were charged along with 60 others of murder, attempted murder, vandalism, possession of weapons, and disturbing the public peace, and were sentenced to 15 years in prison, 5 years probation, and a 2,000 lei fine by the Cairo Criminal Court on September 30th, 2014. In March of 2016, their final appeal was rejected by the Court of Cassation. Gendi's father was released by presidential pardon last year, but his son remains in prison. Gendi had won a scholarship to study engineering at a German university in Cairo and was not yet 18 years old when he was arrested. He lost his place in the university as a result of his imprisonment and is currently enrolled in Sin Shams University and studying from Torah prison. How You Will Be Affected by the New Cyberspace Law, a Guide, by Madame Masseur. If you're hanging out on the street and you see a famous actor riding a car with a senior government official, you take out your phone, snap a photo of them, and post it online. A news media website picks up your photo, publishes a story on their website, linking the story to an earlier news of the celebrity's connection with the senior government official, and shares it on social media platforms. The story finds its way to a government official in the photo. He files a lawsuit, as is his right under the provisions of the cybercrime law, which was ratified by the president on August 18th. First, you will be prosecuted for publishing a personal photo without the consent of the person in it. You can now be punished, and in accordance with the cybercrime law, a minimum of 6-month prison term or a fine ranging between 500 or 1,000 LE. The editor, developer, and host of the news media website, as well as the social media officer running its accounts, whether that officer works directly for the media outlet or for a third-party service provider, will also face a charge of facilitating a punishable crime by law, liable to no less than 2 years in prison and or a fine ranging between 20 to 200,000 LE. What if the investigators find out that your internet service provider did not collect or retain your browsing data, or traffic consent for content for the past 180 days, or that the company hosting the media website did not collect the same information about the website editors? Those companies are now liable to a fine of at least $5 million. and up to 10 million, they may lose their licenses to operate in Egypt. This is an example to illustrate the multiple parties that stand subject to prosecution under the new cybercrime law. For an everyday act like publishing a photo of a celebrity or public figure in a public place, the law passed to protect citizens and safeguard their freedom, according to the head of Parliament's Communications and Information Technology Committee, Nadal Saeed, defines a broad scope of penalties that apply to a wide range of persons. Madame Masseur has developed this guide to make sense of how this law will affect our daily activities, whether it's in casual internet users or as telecom and information IT professionals who work in web development, system administration, and hosting, digital marketing, information security, or online journalism. As a casual user, if you post original content, videos, photos, or text on websites or social media platforms, then that content violates the privacy of others and is posted without their consent, the applicable penalty is no less than a 6-month prison term and or a gigantic fine of $50,000 to $100,000. In accordance with Article 25, the penalty is applicable regardless of the validity of the information involved. So even if the information pertains to a public figure and is in the public interest, for example, if you post a photo of Egypt's interior minister having dinner with his Russian counterpart at a restaurant, you are liable to prosecution. If the original content you post may be construed as violating family principles and values upheld by Egyptian society, let's say, content promoting a woman's right to an abortion, you may receive a minimum 6-month prison or a fine of $50,000 to $100,000. Under the same article, creating parody accounts of public figures is also punishable by the law. Article 24 stipulates that anyone who creates an email address, website, or personal account and fraudulently attributes it to a legally registered individual or organization should be imprisoned for a term of no less than 3 months and or a fine of $10,000 to $30,000. If the account insults the person it parodies, the minimum term is a year in prison, while the minimum fine is $50,000 and the maximum is $200,000. You can be held accountable for accessing or hacking a website, private account, or database or a device, whether you access it intentionally or unintentionally. It's then wrongfully remain inside. Let's say that you have an account on the government's e-procurement portal, and you accidentally access a file containing a list of companies bidding for a certain project. You will be penalized with prison time of no less than a year and a fine ranging from $50,000 to $100,000. The fact that you access the file leads to the damage, erasure, and altering, copying, or redistribution of data or information. The term of imprisonment extends to no less than 2 years according to the provisions of Article 15. Encryption and online security services such as the Tor browser and virtual private networks incur liability for both users and service providers as well. Under Article 22, whoever possesses, acquires, obtains, sells, makes available, manufactures, produces, imports, exports, or circulates any device, equipment, software, passcodes, passwords, or any similar data without permission from the National Telecom Regulatory Authority, NTRA, good reason, or legal justification shall be penalized with imprisonment for a term of no less than 2 years, and or a fine of no less than $300,000 and no more than $500,000. The motive of doing this is proven to be using them to perform any of these actions that the cybercrime law defines as unlawful, or concealing traces or evidence of any of these actions. Finally, if you use wireless networks around you with or without the knowledge of their owners, reach an agreement with your neighbor to use their internet service or use broadcasting channels, for example, a walkie-talkie, without a communications permit or a video-audio broadcasting license, you could receive a prison sentence of no less than 3 months and be fined $10,000 to $50,000 under Article 13. Side note, that's the death of open source in Egypt.